Great, thanks. Thank you both, John and Kathy. Now we've got committee. What do you know? What do you want to know? Yeah, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Kathy and John, first of all, thanks a lot for participating. And um, you asked certainly for some very specific things. These are all things which fortunately resonate with all of the other things we've been hearing are objectives that we want to achieve in our digital identity. It's always nice when we're bringing a consistent message and have a common objective. I don't know if I have a question at this time, but what I have is a request that you do work with us then as we start putting together this framework. You have expertise and you have needs and an understanding of what will need to be put in place for this to work and for it to work effectively and engage commercially, which we know that for acceptance of a digital identity system, it obviously has to meet all the standards that you have, but it has to be of benefit to the people of Wyoming, not just to the government. If it's just beneficial to the government, that'll probably be the first reason why it gets shut down. So I think your input and your continued participation in working with us as we try and find some legislation is going to be vital. I'll ask you both, and either of you can feel free to answer it. If you have any thoughts on preliminary first steps, what preliminary legislation might look like that would be enabling for you, that again would be starting this process while ensuring that we've got that level playing field in place.
Kathy or John?
Yeah, well, I'll start, Kathy, and you can add in. So I would say there's a few things, and I think you're working on some of them already. Is part of it is like the data and how the data gets used and how it's validated is very important to everybody in the ecosystem and stream, right? It's a combination of data too. Some of it's the merchants' data that they've collected, some of it's the consumers' data, and making sure that when it gets contributed into creating this digital ID, that the parties who contributed it are protected on how it's used. And so I would say that's one where if you say, what's a barrier for merchants participating, they're going to tell you, well, we don't know what's going to happen with it. We've only got certain rights to go get that data, and we want to make sure that that it's displayed in a way that is consistent with how we told our consumers we were going to use it, and that it doesn't get used against us in the future and somehow through some collaboration that then gets sold somehow, right? So they want to make sure that that data is protected. The other thing I would say is the sovereignty of the ID. What the merchants want to do is make sure that if they do choose to use this as validation on whether it's on age or whether it's on KLM or whatever, that has been certified so that they don't become liable for other people and other parties within it. So I think those are probably some good stepping stones to start thinking about and starting to help build, to help make sure that we start in the right direction. And we're more than happy to help you as you go down this journey and shape it. You're right. I think the gentleman from IBM said it well, is that no one party can solve this issue. It has to be a collaboration of all the people who need to use it together to build something that then becomes something everybody wants to adopt.
Thanks, John. Kathy?
I would agree wholeheartedly with John. The other point that I would ask you to think about or to consider is how to make sure the legislation that you start out with is within the current and existing framework of legislation, both at a federal and state levels. Because if it gets outside of that, it's going to be much more difficult for the merchants to implement it and to adopt it. So as long as it's staying, within that guidance and framework as well, it will make it an easier process to move through.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Chairman, I follow up with Kathy. One of the things that you raised, though, as identity certification concept is the KYC AML experience. And as you know, we're trying to find a way for the state to have some type of portability in KYC AML. So that's going to be pushing the envelope a little bit, but at the same time, it is one of the things that you really want. So I guess once again, I'll give you that invitation specifically with this one. We'd love to have your expertise and involvement as we try and draft some legislation that builds a KYC AML portability structure that you would be comfortable with. And do you have any ideas? Has anyone in the MAG looked at how that might be done, what we could be doing? Are there any examples of KYC AML portability that we could look to or try and use as guidance that you know of?
Well, first of all, we would love to have that opportunity to sit down with you and you're in the committee and talk about the different ideas. We have some very talented and smart members within the MAG who are always looking at, at different technologies and different ways of doing things. So right off the bat, do I have any, firsthand knowledge of what some of my peers are contemplating? I don't, but I know that there is this desire to be part of this and, to bring us all together to talk and share ideas is something that the MAG would definitely be, and the members would be definitely interested in.
That's wonderful. And we appreciate that. And we welcome that engagement. So we'll make sure that as we move forward, that we have you involved at all times in your community.
Great, thank you.
Chairman Rothfuss, I just wanted to point out that about 20 minutes ago, Representative Mike Yin joined us, and that means that the House is here in full force. Unfortunately, the Senate cannot say the same thing.
Well, welcome, Representative Yin. It's good to have you.
Thank you. My apologies for my tardiness.
Do you want us to just run that all back and redo it briefly, or are you happy with a summary?
I think I'm okay. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Representative Yin. Representative Lindholm.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was actually going to correct you that the cat wasn't here, Mike Yin's cat. So the House was not present, but his cat did show up.
He did show up.
That's nice. So I guess I always feel like me and Senator Rothfuss do this back and forth where he says something in a manner that sounds really intelligent. And I feel like sometimes I need to break it down for like exactly what I think we need, versus sometimes I say something really stupid and he has to say it again to make it sound smart. So the question is, do you see any holes, or do any of your members see any holes in BSA that the state of Wyoming could take advantage of? I don't want to say the word exploit, but there it is.
Yeah, and I would tell you the banking laws isn't where we're the strongest, right? Most of us as merchants, that isn't something that we spend a lot of time on. We usually use third parties to help us with that. So I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but be happy to engage my membership to see if they can give you more information around that.
Awesome.
Senator Rothfuss,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Would you like to make that sound smarter?
No, I was pretty happy with that, actually. I thought that was good. Holes were good.
The only part that confused me about everything was when Representative Lindholm said, sometimes I say things that are stupid, and the sometimes really tripped me up. But I think we're...
You still vote for my bills, just saying.
Weird. Co-sponsor them too? That's weird. Okay. All right. Anything else, committee? No?
Awesome. Mr. Chairman, if I could just really quick, I just want to really say a really huge thanks to Scott and the MAG group. They've really become a kind of a badge that we're starting to wear here in Wyoming, where we brag about them. And I'm excited about their pilot. They represent a lot of big industry, and they represent a future opportunity for the state of Wyoming. So I'm really, really pumped that they're here and they're involved. And yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, John. You know, for one of the things that this committee is constantly battling with is this strangely false perception in the community in Wyoming that there are no tech companies surfacing. There is no economic activity occurring because of all of this. But you know, with the things that you guys are doing, it's proof in the pudding that it's real, and stuff's moving, and this pilot program, and just huge thank you to making it all work. We really appreciate that. Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand perception is our banks are starting to warm up to all this a little more. Would that be a decent call to any one of you that'd like to address that?
Scott?
Oh, I just realized I can unmute myself. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that you're going to see community banks really warm up to this. Okay. It's community banks, local credit unions. They do not make a lot of revenue under the current payment system. Really, it's the big banks that share boards with the duopoly that earn revenues. The others just offer their cards in order to stay relevant. So here we have an opportunity for them to really connect very deeply with their customer base as verifiers, and also earn revenue on every transaction that occurs, and that revenue is paid by the network, not paid by the merchant. So it's yeah, I think that they are a they tend to they have an opportunity to really gain ground in this model more than what they have today.
And just to add a little validity to that, to Scott's statement, is so one of the efforts I've been part of for a long time is the effort in the U.S. to bring faster payments forward within the environment. And I've sat on a lot of the Federal Reserve boards. I sit on the board that's actually part of the council, and it's amazing when, like Scott said, the merchants and the small issuers talk how similar some of our struggles are.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, those small issuers just got me elected again to the board because I've moved to a category where merchants weren't dominant because of the fact that we've been able to work together to move things forward. So to Scott's point, they feel the same, where a lot of the big entities have funneled off a lot of their profitability, and they're looking for efficiency, right? Is what they want to do is create a model in which creates more efficiency, because they want to continue to serve their customers and still have the wherewithal to offer them all of the other service items that they have in there. ICBA is somebody else that we've partnered with on the faster payment effort as well.
Ms. Long?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for, I guess, the group of presenters. Do you see a need for a Wyoming data protection authority or other state agency that would actually regulate data security?
I would say our position has been, we would love to see a federal law around data security, because the problem becomes is if each state creates their own regime around it, then it becomes, how do you manage that? Especially, how do you manage that in a way where today everything else happens cross-border? So what we've been advocating for on that front is actually that we get to a federal standard that we can all know that it's protecting the consumers, and we can all then execute on it in a way that protects those consumers.
Follow up, Ms. Long, or you good? Okay. Anything else, committee? All right. Well, I know we'll be seeing much more of each other, so thank you again for coming today, and thank you for helping us along the journey.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Senator Nethercott, were you waving or are you putting your hand up?
I was waving. I'm a fan.
Gotcha.